what's this guy underneath it?
This one is one of my collaborations with Foot Control Systems, FCS. And this is a custom piece called the Workshop LTDMA. And it's a combination of a few pieces, a few designs in one. It's a saturator clipper, 4 characters, and you have the drive, and you can smooth it, a high end. This is your output of it, how much you're recovering from the clipping. This is your mix knob. The drive is how much it's being pushed. The conditioning tailors the low end to it. Then you can engage it and disengage it. And the next thing is the gear drive. This is like, you can saturate with it, but you can, if you want, you can get to saturation, but you're basically driving the system, and it has a sound of its own that kind of pushes the presence of the sound, and you can engage or disengage and choose how much you're pushing. Wow. And that's also pushing the stereo insert section, which is a small console of 2 inserts, which you can add them each one, or you can, if you add both, you can swap, so 2 becomes 1, and this can drive this. So if you want to push the compression more, you can do this, and it will push into the compression. Then you have the Timber Farm, which is a combination of different transformers that you can choose from.
Oh, cool.
And each one has a different sound, but they also have alterations in them. If you put it in N and 0, it's no, so no alteration.
Okay.
And then you have alteration on the reactivity of them. It's how they react. And each one of these it's not just a transformer on its own, it's the transformer in the system, so it doesn't affect the signal coming in or out in terms of how it's loading it. Then you have an output trim that you can lower the output. And you can engage or disengage this function because it also has a sound. Even if you put it at 0 and engage, disengage, it will sound different. And sometimes you want to addition the lowering of it, and you'll put engage, disengage. Then Turbo Boost it's a kind of a secret sauce here that works with this, and it kind of pushes things up front, makes them very upfront.
Wow.
And then the main process, engage, disengage, is this whole box.
Okay.
So it's a combination of a few different, saturator clipper with a lot of control, a gear drive that pushes the sound and the level, stereo inserts, which right now are connected to a few units that I'll show you later, and then the transformers, and then the alterations on them, and then the output trim, which has a sound, and then the turbo boost and the main process. And then for right now, for these inserts, we have this box, which is called the Torch. Another collaboration I did with FCS, Foot Control Systems. And this basically gives you input trims, conditioning the low end, smoothing the high end, output trims, and then here you can choose what type of amplification you're using and how much you're driving it. So G has no amplification, so you can just use the filters, the low end and the high end filters and the trims. And then if you're going A, B, C, D, E, F, all these are different types of line amplifications, and how much you can drive them up to 5.5 dB. And that's kind of a coloration box that you can choose options, and you can bypass and non-bypass them separately. This can go MS too if you apply the MS here. The Mangal LTD, that's basically a device that I had a different version of it in the past, which I'll show you. And then I collaborated with this with my partner, Chris Henderson from Handy Amps. So we took the original design and added 2 more circuits to it that affect the high end, and they can dampen the high end and do kind of a smoothing till full damping. And also a kind of a scoop, a movable scoop that moves in different areas from the low, mid to the highs, and then an output. This is the original device, the Pele, so it was just a plug and play unit.
Yeah.
And so here we added the other features and switches. So that's the Torch. Then I have, so insert 1 is these units that I mentioned, plus a few extra that I'll show you here. This unit is another collaboration with Roger Foote from Foote Control Systems. This is called the Bench, and it has these amp drive circuits that I can choose between two types. One is very tight and fast, and one is smoother on the high end and rounder on the low end. So it's more of a vintage. So one is more modern, quick. Two is more vintage.
Yeah.
You can turn it on or off, and how much you want to drive it, and how much you want to attend the drive afterwards. And then you have a pad, and then TBM is a kind of a version of a turbo boost thing, but in a different sound. Then you have a trim for the output, because you can drive this unit. And then you have smoothing that you can apply if you put the turbo. It only applies on the turbo. And then you also have clipping diodes here, so you can push it really hard if you want and apply it. So you have smoothing knob, output trim, pad attenuation, amp drive. And then the turbo mode, that's a very subtle thing, but it can affect differently depending on how much things are pushed.
Sure.
And it's affecting that turbo knob.
And what's the name of this called?
This is the Bench.
That's right, the
Bench, the Torch, the Workshop, LTDMA. Those are these units. And then I have the other custom units, the Oven, which this is a prototype. That's why the lettering looks different. And some of the knobs are actually not having the right name.
Sure.
The name here is supposed to be Flow, because that's what it does, like flow here. But back then, this is an old faceplate that was not actually finished like the other ones. So this is the Oven, which some of you might know of the plugin called the Oven from Brainworks and Plugin Alliance, which is a modeling emulation of this.
Yeah.
There was another studio that you went to do a video that actually had this unit.
Oh yeah?
The Hideout.
Kane
Churko has
this. Kevin Churko, that's right.
Kevin and Kane, yeah, they have this. So this is the Oven. It's a very thick and round sound. It could do coloration, tone shaping, and saturation. You have a 3-band Baxendale musical EQ. Like, I call it musical because it's every little move really feels that it's really working with the music. It's not just boosting the frequencies. They're tailored really well. And you can choose between different options for each one. You have a 2-position switch. Then you have the tube coloration in the Cook, and there's 2 different voicings and 2 different intensities. And then you have the solid state section that also changes the sound of the unit from various coloration options to saturation. Choose high coloration or low, but it's to a certain point it's coloration, then above that point it's saturation.
Oh, cool.
And with the coloration, it's also intensity.
Yeah.
So every little move changes how the intensity becomes.
Very good.
And you have air, like we call this warm air. And then this changes the top to presence, and you basically have 4 types of sound on the top burner. Then you have the Stove, which is the sibling of the Oven. It's a different tube topology, and it's a different sound. This is more tighter and cleaner compared to the Oven, which is more thicker and rounder.
Sure.
This also has other features and other types of intensities and sonic options for the tube, and it also can become a tube driver when you change it to induction, and then it eliminates all these switches and knobs and keeps only these 2 knobs and these 2 switches, and it becomes a tube driver that you can saturate with it and push things really nicely.
Wow.
And then, so these are the 2 siblings, the Oven, Stove. We have the Grill, which is even more aggressive. Could be either more subtle, but even more distorted.
Wow.
And it's a solid state unit. Then we have the Cooker, which the Cooker is part of the Oven family, but it's a different thing because it doesn't have that tone shaping options like these. And it's a solid state unit that you have a very big sounding gain structure that's round, and you can push the steam to get more drive into it. The Roast gives you this thickness that has a big range, so when you move the knob, it's not just immediately thickness, it's slowly going to thicker and thicker and thicker,
Yeah.
and you can find the place where you want it to be, and it's not going to be jumping from one setting to another. You can find a range to play with and figure out where is that place that you want. And it has two options, warm and hot. Warm is less intense, hot is more, and it adds thickness to the sides, and like guitars or synths, everything that's like can have more detail and definition coming out, it can lift them up. Then you have the crisper, which is the high end adding to it.
Okay.
You can choose yellow or brown, which is the different types of boosting of the high end. The brown is more energetic one that can be more abrasive or
Yeah.
penetrating. The yellow is the more smooth and
Yeah.
just more airiness. Fry and sear also exist in the Mangal. That's because this was kind of the part of the prototype of what brought this. Fry again, it's a saturation dampening function that as the more you push it, the more it's going to smooth the high end to the point where it just dampens the high end.
Yeah.
That's good for harsh material or stuff that you want to smooth a bit.
Yeah.
The sear will do kind of a scooping that will move to different places, and you can find where you want it, and you can audition with on, off, and see what you think, if this works or not. You can take it out of the circuit. Pressure will be the output, and you can boost with it or subtract or attenuate, so you can just boost your steam and subtract the pressure. Preheat adds to the circuit another set of also a gain and transformers, so you get more level with the transformers as well, and they actually make it very tight. They're really unique transformers. So that's the cooker.